Hello, welcome to the Wadsworth Atheneum Museum of Art's Valentine's Day Tour. My name is Beth Malley, and I'm a docent here at the museum. This tour will focus on objects from the collection with the theme of love has many faces. We could focus on a love between a couple or a family, but it seems to me that there are so many more avenues of love that this tour will think more broadly. First, a bit of history. The Wadsworth Atheneum was founded in 1842 by Daniel Wadsworth. He wanted a center of learning between New York and Boston. The word Atheneum is from the goddess Athena, the goddess of wisdom. Although the museum housed the Library and Historical Society at its inception, they have moved to other locations, and the museum now has five buildings and more than 50,000 objects. It's the oldest continuously operating public art museum in the country. Now let's start our tour. Say hello to the Ellsworths, Oliver and Abigail. This work is painted by the American portrait artist Ralph Earl. The Ellsworths lived in Windsor, Connecticut. Oliver, dressed in his formal jacket and ruffled shirt, was an attorney and politician. He was one of the original authors of the U.S. Constitution. In fact, Article 7, which he wrote, he now holds in his left hand. He was also the third Chief Justice in the United States and a Connecticut senator. His wife, Abigail, dressed in a very formal gray dress with a bonnet that was the height of fashion, generally remained home on the family farm, raising their nine children. Ralph Earl wanted viewers to know a bit more about his subjects, so he inserted a window. In this case, it's a view of the Ellsworth home, known as Elmwood, in honor of the 13 elm trees Oliver planted on the property as a tribute to the 13 colonies. Although one might say they look rather serious, maybe even stern, I chose this work since it reflects a love of country and the sacrifice, commitment, and hard work done by both the Ellsworths. Next, we see a beautiful and majestic landscape titled In the Mountains by Albert Bierstadt. This landscape is known as a composite, which means that the artist used various sketches of mountains, waterfalls, rock formations, grassy areas, etc., to compose this scene. It's not a specific place, but it allows the viewer to travel into a beautiful, quiet scene with the sunlight shining on the water, mountains surrounding the space, a waterfall cascading through the rocks, and a grassy area on the right, perfect for a picnic. Although not a real place, the beauty and serenity can fill our souls. Bierstadt was a member of the Hudson River School, founded by Thomas Cole. This school of artists painted landscapes that were idealized and reflected the awesome power of Mother Nature and the influences of a godly force over the land. These artists were painting in the mid 1800s when the Industrial Revolution was pushing cities out into the majestic landscape. This was not only affecting the land, but the indigenous people who lived there. They too were pushed out. These artists, though, chose to ignore all this in their landscapes and focused only on their concern for the land and their love of nature. We can't let this time of year go by without a reference to Cupid. In this work, Offering to Cupid by Carl van Loo, painted in 1761, we see a puzzling scene. To the right, we see a sculpture of Cupid, his quiver of arrows to the right of his leg. His impish look makes us wonder. You may know his story. He's the god of love, playfully shooting his love arrows at helpless victims and laughing hysterically when the victim falls hopelessly in love with the next person he meets. The sculpture is set on a pedestal in a wooded area. In front of Cupid, we see two women dressed in classical garb. Who are they? Is the woman in white the young maiden, and the woman in blue her servant? What are they doing? We see a garland of flowers between them. Are they thanking Cupid for love found or hoping for love to be found? We can also see a young man coming up behind them. He too has a garland. Is he the chosen love for the maiden? There was an ancient rite where young maidens offered gifts to Cupid, flowers, plants, oils, etc., hoping for love. It is thought that Van Loo was focused on this ancient rite, portraying the idealized spirit of purity and simplicity. Could it be that Cupid answered the offering of the woman and the man magically appeared? Van Loo painted this 4 years before he died. His style changed often throughout his career. This work has a theater like quality where the players are acting out a scene from ancient Greece. Perhaps, if you're looking for love, Cupid is the face you need to find. Our next slide shows us a sculpture from two sides. This is a cat from the Ptolemaic period in Egypt, or the 2nd century BCE. Bastet is her name. She sits elegantly in her case. One can see the gray, polished bronze with a smooth exterior. The cat Bastet represents a female goddess who the Egyptians believed was a maternal protector and guardian of a healthy childbirth as well as cures of illness. In a way, she was a protector of children. She's wearing an aegis or a necklace which is carved around her neck. It contains a solar disk which represents her lioness alter ego. Look at her long neck, her sleek curved body, and long tail that wraps around her legs. Her face is kind, with an almost smiling mouth and etched ears. She even has whiskers carved next to her nose and mouth. They're very difficult to see in this picture, though. Her tall, regal, proud position enhances her beauty. Bastet loved the home, mothers, and children, and protected them from harm. Yes, love does have many faces, even that of a cat. This next work of art represents love that has potential, or maybe not. It's called A Not Misgain by Seymour Gee. Let's look closely at this scene as there's more there than meets the eye. We see a young woman seated at the lower right of the work. She has on a beautiful reddish dress and a gold brooch, which is bathed in soft light. She is concentrating on her knitting problem and not looking out at us. She has a young boy helping her to undo the knot in her skein of yarn. His white collar, lit by the light, draws our eyes to the two of them. But if we look closely to the left side of the picture, we can just make out two men in the background. One man holds a newspaper while talking with the other younger man who's further back. The woman appears to be totally unaware of their presence, despite their proximity to her. Hmm, what does this all mean? Is there an arrangement happening? Does the woman know him? Is she hoping for something more or hoping he'll go away? Then we need to wonder about the knot in the skein, as the title mentions. If you knit or crochet, you know a knot represents a loss of time, rhythm, and progress on your piece. Women have worked on handiwork for centuries and confronted this issue. But could the knot in this case have a different meaning? Knots are ancient symbols for binding together, as in a vow or a promise. Knots can also be forms of constriction or pain. Are we seeing fear of a relationship or love in the making? What do you think? Two clocks. How can this work possibly relate to our theme? Surprisingly, this work relates in a very profound way. It's called Untitled and then parenthetically Perfect Lovers by the artist Felix Gonzalez Torres. For years in art, clocks were used to represent a lifetime. The Dutch actually used hourglasses for this same purpose. These two clocks are circular, representing a continuation. Two people sharing their lives, tasks, joys, and sorrows. The hands of the clock, now in sync, will show different times as the batteries age and begin to slow. Lovers, like clocks, start together, but over time, loss or death can separate them. The artist placed them side by side, which creates the symbol for infinity. But clocks stop working. Lovers spend time together, share the good times and bad, until one is left alone. But is the relationship really over? Could that be what the infinity symbol means? Gonzalez Torres knew all of this from his own experience. His partner died of AIDS and left him to travel on alone. These clocks are a memorial to his partner. Love does have many faces, even clocks. A change of feelings and emotions as we look at Madame Renoir, painted by her husband Pierre Auguste Renoir in 1873. Let's look more closely. She's seated in a casual pose, elbow on a table and hand against her cheek. She has her hair off her face and it's tinged with gray. Her eyes sparkle, her cheeks are flushed, and she looks out directly at us with a hidden smile. She wears a tan and beige dress with full sleeves. There is lace around those sleeves and around her neck as a collar, and it's then anchored by a brooch. She holds her small dog as he snuggles up against her. Note the sweeping brushstrokes of her dress and those same sweeping strokes in the red wall behind her. What's she thinking? Is she happy posing for this picture? Would you know her on the street if she passed you by? Renoir painted in the Impressionist style, broad strokes of paint, an impression of the subject matter, and subjects that focused on everyday life. No large history or religious works for this group. The Impressionists often painted outside, taking their two paints with them as they captured the effect of light on color. Renoir believed, and I quote, a picture must be an amiable thing, joyous and pretty. Yes, pretty, end quote. He painted Mrs. Renoir often, and she helped support him and his work by posing for him. Love of a partner, support for one's work, and love of art itself. In the next slide, we meet the Clerk family, Laurent, Eliza, and their daughter Elizabeth. Who might they be? And how do they relate to our theme? Laurent Clerk on the right is 36 when this portrait was painted. He has a ruddy complexion, curly brown hair, and is dressed fashionably for his time. His wife Eliza has a clear, soft complexion, and her hair is in a fashionable updo. She too is dressed fashionably for the day, with a high ruffled collar and red shawl hugging her shoulders. Her daughter Elizabeth sits on her lap, gazing in the opposite direction of her mom. She's dressed in a deep yellow dress and wears red beads around her neck. The red beads and the red shawl help our eyes move through the work. Her mom's protective, close hold of her stands in contrast to the rather unemotional stares of both of them. Both portraits are set against a blank wall, which adds no information about who this couple might be. Laurent Clerk was born in France. As a 1 year old, he suffered an accident which burned his right cheek severely. Note that in the portrait, his left side of his face is showing, and perhaps that was done purposefully. The wounds grew infected, and he lost his sense of hearing and smell from the associated high fever. As a deaf child in a small town, there was little access to formal learning. On his 12th birthday, he was sent to Paris to study and assist Ambrose Sicard, who was working on sign language for the deaf. Clerk met Thomas Gallaudet on a trip to London with Sicard. Kurt, the Clerk then accompanied Gallaudet back to Hartford, Connecticut, after they had furthered their knowledge of sign language. Together with the help of Mason Cogswell, whose daughter was deaf, they founded the American School for the Deaf, with Gallaudet as its first principal. Clerk married his student, Eliza, and together they had 4 children. We see Eliza showing Elizabeth an E in sign language, which is the first letter of both of their names. Charles Peale, the artist, was interested in the deaf as his apprentice was deaf. Peale met Clerk in Philadelphia when Clerk was there to open another school for the deaf. So now that we know a bit more, does this couple fit the theme? Perhaps helping others, hard work, and the idea of loving one's neighbor with a disability, or maybe because of it, demonstrates yet another face of love. Oh my, love of food and beautiful things shine through in this next work. Still Life with Lobster by Jasper Giard. Let's look. A table, slightly tipped forward, covered with a white cloth, holds a host of objects and natural items. That red lobster front and center, already cooked and ready to crack open. The peeled lemon to the left of the lobster, a crusty bread partially hidden under the bowl, a huge conch shell, exotic fruit, a tall silver capped urn, a bunch of grapes, a tipped silver dish, and 2 roses, one fresh and one more wilting. Under the conch, if you look closely, you can see a goblet holding water or maybe wine. This table is richly set, but something is amiss. Someone had been there, peeled the lemon, tipped the dish, filled the goblet, and cooked the lobster. But now they're gone. Is there a story? The Dutch still life painters often told the story of mortality or impermanence by displaying objects that demonstrated a passage of time and the absence of a person that once was there. Note the circles, diagonal lines, wealthy objects, glass, silver, and a sense of disheveledness that all find their way into this work. Visible are the talents of the artist in his ability to show the reflection in the glass, the delicateness of the rose petals, the texture of the conch shell, the drape of the tablecloth, and the magnificence of the lobster. All of this speaks to love of beautiful things, of food, and of art. Oh my, what is this next object? It's called Sound Suit by Nick Cave. Believe it or not, this is a costume worn by the Alvin Ailey dancers. On the left, you can see the entire work, and you can see feet poking out at the bottom to help us know that it's a costume. It looks like braided rugs, all sewn together every which way. On the right, you can see up close the braided rug concept. What you can't see is that most of the rugs are made of recycled plastic bags. So they would make a sound, a swishing sound, when movement occurred, especially a dance. This piece combines art, costume, sculpture, and comes from Cave's interest in dance, fashion, sculpture, and fiber. Many of his creations are made from found materials. He has made many other sound suits, and he even had an exhibition of them in Chicago in 2006. So, how does this exuberant sound suit fit our theme? To me, it represents love of the arts: dance, sculpture, performance art, visual art, fine art. The arts in general bring out our thoughts, emotions, and even wonder. This piece can make you smile, and yet you can hide who you are when wearing it. Another layer of emotion. This piece is love of the arts, even though you can't see the face underneath. Lastly, for years this painting has touched me. Such a simple, tender scene of love. A mom feeding her baby, and the dad holding so carefully. It's The Holy Family by the French artist Noel Hallet. Although the title tells us it's the Holy Family of Joseph, Mary, and Jesus, it could be any family lovingly caring for their child. Joseph appears so much older than Mary. Look, his scruffy beard, furrowed brow, and large working hands. Look at his face, though, loving, focused, and watchful. Look at Mary. She holds a plate of food and spoons it into the babe's hungry mouth. She has a youthful face that shows care, tenderness, and patience. She wears a pink blouse and sits on a blue cloth, her traditional colors, her shawl gently wrapped around her shoulders, the baby swaddled in cloth as it waits its next bite. His red cheeks, his little hands and toes, all perfect for his age. The group forms a triangle, a strong base to demonstrate the strength of the family. This work is special, as we don't often see images of Jesus doing or being as most children, in this case, eating. Love of family, love of children are reflected so beautifully in this work. Halle came from a family of artists and was hired by both the church and the French crown, as he was known for his history and religious paintings. We've spent time examining the faces of love of country, love of nature, love of mothers and children, love hoped for, love of spouses and partners, love of neighbor, love of food and beautiful things, love of the arts, and love of family. Love does have many faces, but one needs to look out for the impish Cupid and his arrows of love, especially this time of year. Happy Valentine's Day.